You've reached the Signal Watch, movies, television, comics, and more. I'm your host, Ryan Steens. Join me and our cadre of co-contributors as we examine cultural artifacts of the 20th century, boldly explore the 21st, and try to put it all in perspective. Stay tuned. We're gonna try to make this work. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and with me this evening is
Simon Day. I feel the need for a podcast. We're doing my rubbish joke. We're doing Top Gun Maverick today, the best film ever made, apparently.
Apparently. I looked up box office on it. It made $1.4 billion.
Made all the money until James Cameron came along and went, aha, you did want to see another Avatar, so shut up. So it's the second biggest film of 2022. And as Sir Steven Spielberg said the other day, I guess he's made up with Tom Cruise because they kind of fell out. I think because Tom Cruise did bouncing up and down on the sofa when War of the Worlds was coming out. I think Spielberg got angry with him and said, stop doing that. But I guess they've made up because Spielberg the other day said Tom Cruise is solely responsible for saving theatrical releases, which I think is a bit over the top, but I mean, he's kind of got a point.
I think that is really more interesting than the movie itself.
Yeah.
Now that's not a dig at the movie.
Yeah.
It's there's so much around this movie that.
Well, I totally do. I mean, I'm a big Cruise fan anyway, but I like, as you know, I'm eagerly awaiting the next Mission Impossible this summer. But I mean, I take my hat off to the guy for digging his feet in and saying, no, this is not going to streaming, because I think everybody was really pushing him to do that during COVID.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, we're going to wait. Even though we made this a couple of years ago, we're going to wait, and then we're going to release it in the theaters. And it totally worked,
So I didn't see it in the theater. I just saw it the other night for the first time. First time for me to ever pay for 4K for a movie when I rented it.
Oh, wow. Nice.
So I watched it in 4K.
I was just a kind of like I guess like the Blu-ray, but I was like, wow, this looks good. Like, Blu-rays, obviously at this point I've got used to Blu-rays, but I don't know. It looked very good. Yeah. It kind of stood out.
Yeah. I mean, how do we talk about this? So we watched the movie in two halves.
Yeah.
As we frequently do if the movie's over like in 90 minutes and I have to do a podcast.
Top Gun one night and then you watch Top Gun Maverick the next night.
So we watched the first hour and maybe 10 minutes the first night. And
what did you get up to then? What were they doing? Were they on the beach doing volleyball?
They had just had the incident where Phoenix and her friend were in the hospital.
Oh yeah.
So it was when you cut back and Rooster is like sitting sadly in the room and he and Maverick have their confrontation.
Well, it's funny because, sorry, just to like quickly mention that scene. When I was watching, I was going, one of the many things I love about this is this just a good, classic, well-written screenplay. It's, I'm not saying it's the best screenplay in the world. Of course it isn't. But just the fact that when that scene happened, and then straight afterwards, spoilers by the way, go and watch it before you listen to this. Straight after, he has his confrontation with Miles Teller, Val Kilmer dies. I'm like, they're doing the screenplay. It's his lowest moments, and now they're going to push it back up in the last third for his triumph. And I'm like, it's great. You can feel the screenplay working.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. And I think there's, different ways to look at that. When Jamie and I turned it off, we kind of looked at each other and we said, well, this is just Top Gun again. It's like when we went to go see Force Awakens, and you're like, well, I've seen this movie before.
Yeah.
And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I don't think. It's like, I enjoyed Mary Poppins Returns, all these, kind of 30 years later, we're going to make it for a new audience, but the character is older and grayer. It's, Color of Money versus The Hustler.
Yeah.
And speaking of Tom Cruise, and it's an interesting kind of weird artifact because the movie is written very much like the crowd pleasers of that era, of the kind of the 80s before you got into kind of the cynical 90s.
Well, yeah, and we can talk about why this was so successful, but I think it very cleverly it just gave everybody, especially guys our age, guys in their 40s and 50s, I think it just gave them everything they didn't realize they'd kind of been gasping for in the last
Jennifer Connelly.
Jennifer Connelly, totally. Jennifer Connelly, old Porsches, the Who and David Bowie on the soundtrack. Yeah, I mean, it's like basically, it kind of like, it almost went like, we remember the films we used to love in the 80s. Well, here's an updated version of that, and we're not going to have any message in there. We're not going to have any social commentary. We're not going to belittle or destroy or break down the hero. Looking at you, Star Wars, and James Bond a little bit. We're going to hold him up, but we're also going to have a team behind him, a younger team. We're going to have a little bit of nostalgia, not too much, but I think they had the perfect amount of flashbacks in it. A little bit of Anthony Edwards. It made me laugh though early on where Tom Cruise, in his locker, he's got all these photos. I'm like, you would have never have taken that photo of like Meg Ryan and Anthony Edwards kissing. You would have, like, especially as a 20-year-old or 25-year-old, you wouldn't have gone like, hey guys, can I take that photo and can I keep it for 30 years? It's like, but it's like, it ticks. It's almost like going to a restaurant, and some restaurants, they, you go in and they're playing the Who and the Stones, and you can get all the classic food and a burger and fries, and certain 40, 50-year-olds with a certain amount of income love it and go every week and have the burger and have the chicken fried steak. It's that kind of movie, really. It ticks all the boxes.
Yeah, and I think there's the cynical part of me that kind of wanted to argue about that initially, like after the first hour.
Yeah.
And then I watched the second half.
You settled into it.
Then I watched the second half and I was like, this thing's all right, man.
Yeah. Tom Cruise has stolen the end of Star Wars, but I don't mind.
Right. Well, I mean, let's be honest. It is absolutely a mishmash of it starts with the right stuff.
Yeah.
Completely, like, shockingly steals from the right stuff in the first sequence. Including having Ed Harris there.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I didn't think of that. Yeah.
And then it goes into Top Gun mode. You get all the Top Gun music, and except for Berlin, which is a scam.
What made me laugh was like Tom Cruise looks about 10 years older. Ed Harris looks about 70 years older than they did in the 80s.
Oh, Ed Harris looked like he was 45 when he was 20, man.
I'm like, Ed Harris must be going, you bastard. So.
Yeah, they could only bring back what was his name, Merlin.
Oh yeah. Is anyone still alive or like upright or whatever?
Yeah. Oh, that one guy kept in shape. Bring him back. He can be in the movie.
Tom Skerritt, he's still alive. Bring him back.
Yeah. But
did you see that funny picture as well? You only saw it briefly when Miles Teller looked at it, but it was obviously like photoshopped. but it had Tom Cruise in the middle, and then Val Kilmer. And it was funny because I'm like, I guess those guys were in Top Gun. I'm sure they actually used the real actors, but then it had like Thomas Kerrick just cheekily looking over, I think, Val Kilmer's shoulder. I'm like, I'm sure he wouldn't have been in that picture, but I don't know. It's like just have to get everybody back for that picture.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, and then yeah, like you said, the end of it is, we're gonna, bomb the Death Star, in this
My
mysterious,
laser's not working.
totally not Iran country.
My targeting system's not working.
Right.
Use the Force.
Yeah, you don't stop thinking. Feel. Yeah, it was quite bold, those moves they were making. But yeah, I mean the movie, I think, is essentially like a lot of fun. I do get that. I don't quite get the I saw it in the theater 5 times thing, but I'm also not a person who frequently does that anyway.
I will say it's one of the few films that I think I'm glad I saw in the theater. Like, a lot of these are sold, like, you have to see this in the theater.
Yeah.
And a lot of them you really don't. But it's like, this is one where I kind of regret not getting those those crazy seats, the wobble.
Mm-hmm.
I would have gone that far, and I probably wouldn't get those for anything, even Star Wars or something, but I would have got one of those and paid through the nose to watch this, I think.
Which is interesting because I think this movie is essentially a drama and not an action movie.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, oh no, go on.
And so yeah, the action that's in it is training flying. It's not like Arnold Schwarzenegger like dodging, enemy soldiers or something. That doesn't happen until like the last 20 minutes of this movie.
Yeah. Well, there's the tease, isn't there? And there's the training, and then there's the actual mission.
Yeah.
So again, very old school in a way, going way back to the Dirty Dozen and all those kind of movies. But but I think you're right. I think what I liked about it was, and I've been saying this since Mission Impossible 3, like about 20 years ago. What I like about it is Tom Cruise would have been Hangman in the first Top Gun. He was the cocky, eminently punchable, person who, was the hero, but was a bit annoying. And then somewhere around Mission Impossible 3, he suddenly like started aging and being a bit more human and getting hurt. And, and almost like, the same thing as Bond did with Daniel Craig, having regrets and having feelings and having worries. And I think they did a really good job in this of showing that, and actually making him very human and, still the hero, definitely, the hero, which again, I think sadly these days is kind of, quite refreshing for us, because we're so used to these getting knocked down or ridiculed these days. It's nice when they're shown a bit of respect, but also the fact that, yeah, he still hasn't really got over Goose's death. Mm-hmm. He's obviously kind of like always been a bit crap with women, even though he's interested in Jennifer Connelly, and he has to kind of, get around these hurdles. In a way, he's always had Iceman bail him out, so he's never had to like fix the situation himself. So yeah, he hasn't really grown up in a way.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the interesting bit of it. You talked about how they didn't like, set him up for he has his failures or whatever in this movie. But
well, if somebody else had made this film, like say the Disney had made this film, Tom Cruise would have been a sad old drunk at the start, and then some young Latino female pilot would have said, "Hey, I'm going to show you how to do this properly. I'm going to make you believe again." And then at the end, she'd have done the mission, and maybe he'd have been on the boat going, "You did it, kid. You made me believe again." And it's like, and it would be rubbish. So this is much better.
I would like to argue with you about that just on principle, but I mean, yeah,
you're wrong.
Wrong. I say, but I think you also just described Iron Eagle, so I don't know what to do.
If this had Luke Gossett Jr. in, going, nephew, there's a big shark, nephew. Where's my dinner?
That's a Jaws 3 callback, everybody. But yeah, yeah, I mean it's a enjoyable movie. It's the first time I haven't wanted to punch Miles Teller in the face while watching him for more than 20 minutes.
Yeah, he was good. He was very good, actually.
Yeah, he was well used. I think and well cast as Anthony Edwards' son. That made sense. And they didn't spend too much time. They did it all through kind of like indicators of like, oh, he's got his dad's mustache and shirt. Like,
yeah. I mean, I felt like when he was playing the piano in the bar, that was a bit like, would he be that close to what Anthony Edwards was doing? But maybe I don't know, maybe he would.
He was pretty young when his dad died. I would say no, but
maybe Meg Ryan talked about it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it was the same movie though, where Glenn Powell, who UT Austin graduate who plays Hangman, walks in and calls Tom Cruise, who looks all of 42, sitting at the bar, calls him Pops.
Yeah,
like nobody, even our age, calls old people Pops.
Like, no. Even we're not called old men quite yet, I think. Hopefully.
But also, no one's called anybody Pop since an Archie comic in like 1970. Like it just hasn't happened.
Yeah, I mean, I liked great cast though. I mean, like I really like John Hamm.
Yeah,
the kind of because I mean he wasn't. This is what I liked about it. There wasn't anybody painted in broad strokes. I mean, even John Hamm is just a company man. He's not even a dick, really. He's a company man. He's like, look,
completely agree. Yeah,
you are. You shouldn't be doing. You shouldn't still be around. You're loose cannon, and we don't want you, and you're only here because Falcon was kind of protecting you. But it's like, but then again, very American in the way that you kind of do need that free spirit to kind of get the job done. I mean, at least in legend. I don't know in reality these days, but
well, I mean, I don't disagree with any of that. What I kind of rolled my eyes at was once or twice at the beginning of the film when they're like making sure Maverick doesn't play by the rules because his name's Maverick.
Yeah,
like. You could almost see like John Hamm being like Maverick, like this guy's a loose cannon. Like they didn't do those lines, but you could tell that was their internal monologue, right?
Or Ed Harris going, just as I was about to sack you, I got the call from Top Gun. Looks like you're back in action, you son of a bitch.
I mean, that was when I was feeling a little skeptical about the movie. Like, I was just like, they got Ed Harris, and then that was the dialogue they gave him. Like,
I was before I saw this though. I remember thinking, because I went to see this at the theater, and it was before it really took off. So I was just like, hey, I like Tom Cruise, I like Top Gun. I'll go and see what it's like. But I remember, like, before I saw it, thinking, how are they going to use Val Kilmer? They're just going to have a picture of him on the wall because I heard he'd been sick, he'd been ill, and or is it going to be flashbacks, or are they going to de-age him like Marvel, and have a couple of scenes with him, like pretend flashbacks which they never filmed originally. And I thought what they did with him was, again, and I'm sure Tom Cruise had a part in this, was like very respectful and really nicely done. Actually, in fact, that's probably made me, not hard. But that made me tear up a bit.
No, it was, there's a lot at play for guys our age when we see, we all know kind of what happened to Val Kilmer. We are in a very weird age of like Raquel Welch just died, right? I mean, we're in an age where our gods are dying, like left and right. And Val Kilmer was, when I was first exposed to him in like Real Genius, he was this youthful whatever character, and now he's playing a crippled grandfather. And I'm just like, I feel like the guy in Indiana Jones who chose poorly. Like, like, oh my God, time is just passing us by. But
Malcolm McDowell says in Star Trek, time is the fire we all burn in.
Right. Yeah, it's and so yeah, I think that scene had a couple of layers to it that the movie was very aware of, and it handled it. I can't imagine how they could have done it better. I mean, they let Kilmer look like $1,000,000.
Yeah.
um,
And he kind of got all the jokes. He got the last word and stuff. And
he was on his feet in the last scene you saw him. Like he wasn't just sitting there. Like he was.
yeah,
You saw Val Kilmer as you remembered him.
yeah,
So even if that's his last movie, it's a pretty good way to go out in a film.
yeah, totally, totally.
But yeah, the if you want to nitpick at the movie, it does definitely have some of the I think some dialogue that could have not had as much 80s all over it.
I love it. Oh, more dialogue.
And I will never understand why they flew the mission they flew. Like there was no explanation why that had to be done by airplanes that were manned. And I only watched the movie the one time.
So Austin Powers, yeah, they could have used a laser from space.
Well, I was like, we have had bunker busters for 30 years. Like there's no world I'm aware of in which we couldn't have just lobbed a bunker buster at that place.
Mm.
And I would have liked a little more explanation that didn't make Ed Harris sound 1,000% correct at the beginning of the film.
What did John Hamm say? He said something like, we can't get close enough because the missiles. And then there was something else we can't do because of the terrain or something. So they kind of tried to explain it, but I mean, it did seem a bit mad, the whole plan, to be honest.
Yeah, I was like, there's nothing here they're doing that you can't do with a drone.
Yeah, yeah.
Because when you fly a drone, you basically have 360 vision, and you're sitting there somewhere in Arizona in a trailer, piloting it. Like there's nothing that says you can't do everything they did or use a stealth bomber from practically space to drop something on somebody. So or shoot something from, because they're pulling naval ships right offshore. So I didn't know why they weren't just lobbing things into this valley, but it wouldn't have happened if that weren't the case. So,
well, yeah, and I really enjoyed the build up and the mission. I did think once he'd been shot down, to quote Monty Python, I was like, it's getting too silly now. Stop that. But then and a little bit Rambo-ish as well, weirdly. But it's like, but I mean, that was still fun. Just them kind of like obviously finding the F-14 and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, again, the nitpicks. You're like, if an F-14 is just sitting there and it wasn't like ready to be screened or whatever, like,
probably wouldn't have an engine in it.
Yeah, that thing was not going to go anywhere. But I know they couldn't do that in the movie, so it was enjoyable, and as I said to Jamie as it taxied out, like, oh god, like that is the plane of our youth, right? It's like we all had model F-14s, we all loved the F-14. It's like, who cares about the F-18? No one's ever cared about the F-18.
No.
But we all loved F-14s and F-15s back in the day. So
I mean, Top Gun, it's funny because I only saw Top Gun, the original Top Gun, for the first time a couple of years ago.
And are you serious?
Yeah. I watched it during COVID one night. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I've probably seen loads of clips from it over the years. So, and Berlin, Take My Breath Away, being on heavy rotation. So I'd seen that, when I was young. But it was the first time I think I watched it from beginning to end. And I remember, like, it was okay, a bit cheesy, but it was okay. But, when I was growing up, that was a girls' film. Then Dirty Dancing was what they were watching. And I was watching Aliens and Predator, So I wasn't really that interested, because I'm like, oh, it's all lovey-dovey. I don't care about that. But then, watching Maverick, I think it was actually a superior film. I think it's like, a sequel that's actually better than the original.
Oh, agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
God rest Tony Scott, but yes.
Yeah, that's no kind of slight on Tony Scott because I mean he just directed what he was hard to do, I'm sure. But it's like, the original Top Gun was very 80s, very surface, very like, like a bit like an officer and a gentleman. It's like a recruitment poster to get people in the Navy, right? Um,
And we need to talk about that. Yeah.
yeah. Whereas this one was more like, well, this guy's aging, he's got all these problems. How's he going to work his way through them?
Hmm.
And also obviously have an exciting mission as well, which he's got to complete. Yeah, I really enjoy it. I mean, obviously, it struck a huge chord with the population. I mean, I think it's nice having a film kind of like like we used to have, like Jurassic Park or even some of the earlier Marvel films where everybody can go and see it from your like your 10-year-old you know elementary school student to your grandma, and we'll probably enjoy it.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's funny you should say the thing about Top Gun being a girls' film because here it was not. I want to
Ah,
just like full stop. It was for everybody, as you just said. Like
yeah.
I was taken to it opening weekend because my dad is a huge aviation buff, and
Mm.
um, he did the thing my dad always did when we walked out of a movie. Oh, those shots were incorrect, and the wings were open in some shot, and then they cut to the next shot, and the wings are closed, and what a bunch of garbage. But he
Dad,
liked it because he got
that's
to
for
see
the day.
airplanes. But yeah, I think they felt a little uncomfortable that we just watched Tom Cruise be all over Kelly McGillis for like 5 minutes. So
Yeah, this was
that was
this
like
was normal.
12.
This was more restrained, but then they are older, so they probably haven't got as much energy.
I think also they just
Hmm.
don't put those scenes in movies anymore. Like,
No, well, they used to stop dead, didn't they? Like in the 80s, the film used to stop dead for like a sex scene for five
yeah,
minutes.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like everybody wants to see you guys romping around, and they've kind of realized people actually don't care. So we get
Hmm.
it. Dot dot dot. Next scene, they're pulling the sheets up over themselves.
Yeah.
Um, and I think frankly, Tom Cruise is how old now? Like,
60.
yeah, I was going to say, so he was probably like 58, 57 when they were filming this.
Well, it made me laugh because he obviously looks phenomenal, but he looks much better than we are.
Yes.
But also it made me laugh on the beach scene, but they kind of kept cutting away from him because they're going, look, these 20-year-old chests are much nicer over here. Look
But
at
they
Tom
also
Cruise.
don't. They also don't want like they know that their younger audience who's shown up for the movie is going to be like, why am I watching these old people? No matter how attractive people middle age might find them,
Yeah, a
you
little
know.
bit of Tom Cruise nipple, just a little
Yeah.
bit. But then it was also kind of nice how he had to take it. Well, I don't know if he had to take a break, but how he kind of went and just went, I'm gonna go and see with Jennifer Connelly for a bit. You guys carry on.
But yeah, like I was saying, like everybody went to go see this thing in the original Top Gun. But I
Yeah.
was talking to Jamie about the movie, the original, last night after we finished it, and she just kept going, well, everyone went to go see that movie like 5 or 6 times. And I was like, no, your girlfriends all went to go see it 5 or 6 times.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
everybody went to go see it, but then the people who obsessed over it were a little bit were often like young women who were like, ooh, beach volleyball scene.
yeah.
Um,
Or wouldn't it be nice meeting a guy in uniform?
yeah.
Yeah,
And so yeah, it I I I do definitely remember that, but at the same time, I also had a Top Gun tabletop game
mm,
that you would set up different fighters against each other, and you'd roll dice and da 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 da. But it was all in like a big hex map. So yeah, I mean, I was fairly into it, and then I tried to rewatch it in college, and I was just like, it just doesn't work for me anymore.
yeah,
And I have not seen it since. I haven't seen it since college. So I didn't know what to expect coming into this. What I was shocked at was how I remembered all the beats because this movie was like, here's
yeah,
that beat with a twist. Here's that beat with a twist.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
I mean, definitely a very good companion piece. Um, and I think, yeah, like nicely old fashioned. I mean, the hope is that maybe this will usher in more like kind of mature. Well, I mean, for mature audiences, kind of movies. and maybe kind of like, kind of like more kind of like classic scripts. Because I mean, I just read recently that Picard, season 3,
Mhm.
everybody's raving about that because that's also got new writers and it's got all the people from the next generation, and they're kind of saying it's kind of giving them a send off that they never had in the movies, and the
Right.
movies just kind of petered out, and it's got
That's
like a
one way of putting it.
wonderful kind of like, this is what we wanted. This is like, we wanted to have Riker and Picard back together having these conversations and laughing together and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, we've since about 2015, 16, 17, it's all gone a bit wokey, and we just haven't really had much of that. So I think, this hit so hard because there was a big need for it or want for it. Um, and again, if you have too many of these, yeah, it might kind of get old very quickly. But I think this definitely works. Yeah,
Yeah,
filled a gap in the market.
it and that was kind of my assessment of the film was, well, it did a few things. It absolutely found a gap in the market that nobody has acknowledged exists. Like everybody walks around going, "Oh, Marvel's killed cinema," blah blah blah.
Well, they
No,
also
yeah,
said
but what
like,
are you programming against it? It's like everyone's shocked at the success of like 80 for Brady right now.
well, they were saying from COVID, like Spider Man was the first big film that got everybody out, but this was the one that got the kind of 40 and over audience out,
Yeah.
which hadn't bothered coming out even for Spider Man.
Yeah, and there are definitely these kind of like action drama markets, and we keep talking about this being a throwback to the 80s. Like, look, the first picture to win the best picture was Wings, which is
Mm.
about fighter pilots and their women,
Yeah,
and like the hard life that it is being a fighter pilot and the women who love them.
yeah,
This is
yeah.
not a new formula.
Oh no, no, no.
Like, go watch the Dawn Patrol, go watch, there's a million of these things, and for whatever reason, the kind of post Top Gun took a lot of the 80s one took a lot of guff because it was seen as this recruitment poster and really jingoistic and
Oh
whatnot,
yeah,
but so was everything in the 80s.
yeah. Rocky Four.
But it did get people to go sign up to go join the Navy and the Air Force. Like tons of people. The recruiting for the
Oh yeah.
military after Top Gun was huge. I don't know or believe that will happen with this movie. I think we're in a different world now. But
Well, I think, like you said earlier, I think this is more about the argument humans versus drones, and obviously humans are going to lose that at some point. But that line early on, it's like your kind is heading for extinction. Yeah, but not today.
yeah,
Which is a kind of nice line that kind of I think resonates with all of us anyway.
you know.
Yeah.
The other thing this movie did, like I laughed at Jamie and said, well, we have an hour left of this movie or something whenever we were dialing back in. I was like, but it's going to be 20 minutes of credits at the end. Well, I was taking in Marvel time on that because everything's a freaking
Yeah,
CGI. They can't eat a piece of pizza without the pepperoni being rearranged. And
it's true.
this movie is almost all in camera. Like
Yeah,
they did all the things in the jets. They actually went up in the back seat of real F-18s.
yeah. It's
The
amazing.
Navy was
Especially,
more than happy to participate.
I mean, especially compare to the first movie. It's amazing some of the shots they get in this one.
Yeah. And it just completely insane aerial stunts. And that's like, if you go back to like Howard Hughes, when he first starts making movies, before he went off and ran an airline empire,
Mm.
he was making completely batshit airplane movies. And we've kind of forgotten that that's possible, that you can do these things without CGI. It cost them a lot of money to do, but they also made back 10 times their budget.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah,
it's okay if they spent that money up front.
yeah.
um,
Well,
and
it's
so,
also
yeah, I
again,
love the fact that they actually did like real, and it's the thing that you and I talked about after the last Mission Impossible movie of so
yeah,
much of that is real. Like, even if, Tom Cruise isn't really going to die, jumping from building to building, he did break his leg.
yeah. Oh
Like,
yeah.
shit happens, and shit happened when these guys were going up in the jets, and
Yeah.
um,
It's a lovely throwback again to kind of practical,
yeah,
which I think for some reason, probably because like it's mainly 20-year-olds doing it. Like Hollywood's kind of forgotten that, like, well, you use CGI, it's faster, it's cheaper, but it's like, but sometimes it might not be as good and might not look as good.
yeah. You're just not going to get the right reactions of the people in the cockpits if they're like reacting to a tennis ball being thrown by.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Same as the Star Wars prequels.
Mm.
People just like talking to nothing, and they're like, you can kind of tell they don't know where to look really.
Yeah.
No, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, I did see it about 5 times in the theater, and I'm sure I did ask if you wanted to go, and I guess you weren't coming out
I
then.
wasn't going to movies yet.
But yeah, I enjoy. I mean, put it this way, I only bought 2 films last year that kind of came out, and it was this and Elvis, and and I think in a way that's bad because I think that's the least new films I've ever bought. But then those were the two I enjoyed the most. So I think the fact that says something.
Um, we haven't really talked much about, aside from going, haha, elbow, elbow, Jennifer Connelly's in this.
Cool, blimey.
But
Talk about aging well.
yeah, Jesus. Yeah, she's doing all right, that Jennifer Connelly.
I was a bit worried a few years ago because she started getting too thin, like they always do in Hollywood. But I
Yeah.
think she's pulled it back a bit, so that's good.
Yeah. And I liked her character. I like the fact that, she wasn't somehow this like sexy 45-year-old who
Yeah,
never had a kid and had no life that existed before. Like, I've just been a bartender here with nothing going on, up until the time you show up, Tom Cruise. Like she had like an actual character and whatnot, and you understood there were things at stake. And for as much time as they were able to spend with her and that stuff, like, again, you could
to give him.
criticize it, but I'm like, I think it basically works, except for right at the very, very end when you're like, so Tom Cruise gets the Porsche and Jennifer Connelly, and
Yeah, nice retirement. He's finished his plane,
yeah,
building his plane.
which by the way,
everything.
that's his real P-51. He owns that.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
He
Cool.
flew it for all the scenes at the end. Yeah, that's his. Yeah, that's.
That's so cool.
I said to Jamie, I turned to her, I was like, that son of a bitch is probably really flying that. She's like, that's his plane. And I was like, God damn you, Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Like, of 2 planes that I would ever want to own, that's one of them. So
He do everything. He's got everything.
shut up, Tom Cruise.
Yeah, no, I liked it because it was without bashing him over the head again, like, a lot of these recent movies, wokey movies, she had a personality and she kind of gave him some shit for like his past behavior. But then it was also very realistic and natural in the fact that, she kind of forgave him and they kind of like, worked together. And then she obviously gave him a bit of advice when he was down. And I really like the dynamic with the daughter as well, with her saying, don't break her heart again if you're going to start seeing again. I thought it was really well done. Yeah.
Yeah, there's kind of an unspoken thing with, well, there are lines, but you don't get to hear them as an audience, which is a fascinating choice the movie makes, where he shows up in his dress whites and he's clearly making some statement to her of great gravity of, one, I'm going on this mission, I may not come back. But what else is he, and she goes to sail while he's gone. Like, he has to get away. She is on a boat with her daughter away from the pilots when she doesn't know if he's coming back.
Yeah, I haven't thought of that, but that's right. That's a very good reading of it. The fact that she doesn't want to kind of be reminded of what could happen.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I
thought it was like, for as little time as they were able to give to that kind of B or C plot line, it was pretty well done.
Yeah. No, I think it was very nice. I'm very kind of like, it seemed very kind of like, well, it seemed like a real relationship. It wasn't like, like I say, it wasn't the kind of cheese of the 80s with Kenny McGillis, where he's chasing you into the restroom. And it isn't like the horrible wokey stuff where it's like, well, you're rubbish and I'm a woman, so I'm going to tell you exactly what to do, or laugh at you. So it was just like, it was like a real relationship. I also have been listening to the soundtrack in my car today, and I think big kudos for the soundtrack. The soundtrack really kept me in the film. A couple of good songs, interludes. I mean, maybe nothing quite up there with Berlin, but what is, right? But
I'm not going to argue. Like, the people aren't going to see me shrug on the audio podcast. So, like, I to this day love that song. I saw Berlin play with you a few years ago, and it was just, they played.
I mean, that time for those power ballads is probably gone, but I mean, like, there's a couple of good songs in this, and I think Hans Zimmer, and they brought back some original tracks from Top Gun, like Danger Zone at the start, which was nice.
Well, there's kind of a theme that I don't know who scored the original film, but
Harold,
kind of what's that?
Harold, is it Faltermeyer, who did Beverly Hills Cop? I think could be wrong.
I always thought Axel F did.
Well, he did the theme. He did.
I've not thought about the score to Beverly Hills Cop in 30 years. But yeah, they did call back to that. Lady Gaga has a song at the end that I thought was a really good track.
Yeah,
really enjoyed that one.
Something like that. Yeah, that's just really nicely done. It felt like a very polished product.
Mm-hmm.
Like it felt like old Hollywood, to be honest.
And that's kind of where I kind of walked out of, like, this. Okay, so I'm saying in my mind, it's filling a place in the market that is not currently being served in it to the tune of $1.4 billion or whatever.
Yeah.
So what do you do knowing that, and knowing like they, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't when you do this like comeback thing? Like Force Awakens clearly worked.
Well, it's interesting because I think with this, everybody was saying, no, it's been too late. They should have done this 15 years ago, 20 years ago, start of the 2000s. Because, the recent examples we've had have been Tron Legacy, which I actually enjoyed, but that flopped. There was a Thing prequel, which, again, I actually enjoyed, but that flopped. So, I think a lot of people were like, oh, it's been way too long. But I think if you do it right, and if your timing is good, not necessarily, it can work.
Well, what I'm curious about is, okay, say you're not doing a sequel, say you're
like a reboot instead.
A reboot, or you just want to make something new. What is the takeaway on this of, like, I understand where you're coming from and what you're saying with the wokey stuff, because I understand sometimes that becomes the A plot, and it
almost takes over.
And so this doesn't have that necessarily. It allows the A plot to be the A plot. It has a few things it drops in there that they make sure they're.
Well, like for instance, this had a diverse cast, but they didn't make a big deal about it.
And they made sure they gave Hangman shit about his overt sexism about Phoenix being, part of the crew. Like, that was dealt with in hand, right?
Yeah, and my argument would be, we've been doing that for decades, like in Aliens, very well, without turning it into a huge, bang gong issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if you don't notice it, it's probably been done really well. If somebody has to keep telling you, it's a bit clunky.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking of, like, how do you, like, rev up the Hollywood machine to start thinking along the lines of drama, romance, like all the things you think of as being like the best of what movies did and do in 2 hours versus a 9-hour TV show or a 14-hour TV show.
Well, there's an argument that, the problem is partly the script. I mean, partly I think it comes down from management. It's like, you need to have this, like the big thing about like the recent Ant-Man is apparently it started off a lot darker.
Hmm.
And then from, the higher ups, it came down, no, you've got to put some Marvel jokes in. And they kind of diluted it down. So it's just the same as any other Marvel film, right? So you need to stop all that. But then you also need like scripts probably written by people who, well, A, are good script writers, obviously, but B, maybe have some life experience, maybe hiring people in their 20s who haven't really done anything isn't the best place to start. But then it's hard because Hollywood, I think, is very ageist that way. So it's kind of like, you're probably pushing against the tide a little bit.
But I think there's some truth to that, and give people time to actually do their research and actually understand that what they're making movies about. And frankly, remember, it's not a choice between Ant-Man and Tar. Like, we don't need to go into Christmas and just brutalize people because you want to make a sad movie so it gets Oscar, attention. Like you're allowed to make these kind of like it has a happy ending and they end up together and everything worked out because sometimes that's what people want to pay $12 to see.
Well, it's also interesting that we live in a time where, for instance, there's a new Indiana Jones coming, right? Now you and I.
There's what?
I know. It's a shock. It's the first you've heard of it, I know. But
nowhere on the internet.
but obviously people your age and my age, we grew up with Indiana Jones, so there's a hope that it's going to be good. Now the fear is, did the people who make it respect what came before, or are they trying to like change it or reinvent it, or are they injecting maybe these present day political ideologies into it, which is going to because that's kind of the same thing with James Bond. The last James Bond film, I felt like, and this is probably more Daniel Craig than James Bond, but I feel like, it wasn't really, it was starting to not feel a bit like James Bond to me because I'm like, well, hang on, he's got a kid now and he'd rather get blown up than try to find a cure for his condition. And I'm like, it doesn't really feel like James Bond. It's like I like James Bond doing sexist jokes and shooting people first before they get a chance to get their gun out. But now obviously stuff has to progress to a certain extent and change and move with the times. But I think if you change too much of the core character, you lose the character.
And I understand, especially when you talk about this is a James Bond movie where he has a child, and
what's going on? What's going on?
Well, at that point, you're right. It could be anybody, and that is.
Or maybe they could have still done it.
What's that?
Maybe they could have still done it, but just done it better.
Yeah,
as well.
They didn't though. But
it's kind of tough, isn't it? Because you kind of want. You want more the same, but you also want change, and it's a very fine balancing act. And I think that's why in this they managed that very well. They kind of they kept it just on the kind of tipping point.
Well, as part of what's so interesting about they should have done this 15 years before. It's like, well, absolutely not, because the interesting thing about this story is he's way past his shelf life as a pilot to begin with in the first frame.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. Now, Indiana Jones maybe waited too long, but we'll see. But to be honest, even with that, if they don't do any silly stunts, and if they have him more like Connery was in the third one, where he has to use his brains or his wits more. I mean, we've been saying this about Roger Moore for years, right? Yeah. The Bond films missed a trick in the fact that rather than hire really old guys to be baddies, have him go up against a younger guy, but he hasn't got the physical strength anymore, or he hasn't got the speed, and he has to use his wits and what's around him.
Yeah, and which I think is kind of, we will certainly, I'm sure, do a Dial of Destiny or whatever it's called podcast when it comes out. But
we should do a cinema trip now you're coming out soon.
All right.
The
Sure.
enthusiasm overwhelms me.
No, I'm going to roughly commit to that. Sure. I would like to. That sounds fun. But yeah, anyway, I think this is a good example of like it was the right story for the right character in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
They were able to do the thing with Rooster because you needed 30 years for that to happen.
Yeah.
And you needed him to be at where he's at in his career, where he's clearly should have done much better. Like they didn't say much about it, but like the fact he's a captain still at that point is bananas.
Well, they had like Jennifer Connelly and her daughter kind of joke about it with him, and you know, and he's like, "I'm very, very decorated, Captain." You know.
Yeah.
And actually, had Harris saying it as well. You know, I mean, a few people mentioned it and say, you know, what are you doing with your life, basically?
Yeah, and I think it sets the character at a really interesting point. I have less of a problem with I know like when Star Wars came out and everyone or Last Jedi and everyone was like, "Oh no, Luke should be this amazing warrior." I was like, "Ah, that's awesome. That's awesome that he's old and is telling everyone to go to hell." Like because that's going to be me. That is me right now. I don't want to be bothered.
Well, you know, the perfect way of doing it, which actually I'd love to do as a podcast with you, is something like Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood, where the first half of the film you kind of are crap and out of shape, and then of course, you know, last 10 minutes you remind everybody, you know, what it's all about.
Yeah.
Or why they were like kind of talking about you. So that's what they should have done. And you know, to be honest, to give The Last Jedi a bit of credit, they kind of did do that. They did have Luke at the end, you know, do his projection thing. And, you know, I didn't mind that. That was all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was just such a gear change after the end of Force Awakens.
Yeah.
That it was a bit of a kind of kick in the nuts that it took you a while to kind of go, oh, they're doing that instead? Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it feels very different from the farm kid who's like, gee, I get to be a Jedi.
Yeah.
So
I mean, yeah. And also, it might not actually fit the character. That might be the main problem, you know. Yeah.
Anyway, I found myself enjoying this movie. I wasn't dreading watching it, but I just didn't know what to expect when I threw it on. There's definitely times where people are so excited about something. I'm like, if I don't like this is going to be a really rough podcast.
Well, it's funny. I'm the same as you. If something gets too popular, I almost avoid it. And I think I was lucky that I saw this right at the start of it coming out, because I think I could actually be the annoying person who said to other people, "You should go and see that," instead of like have people say that to me all the time.
Yeah, especially the back half. I really, including the goofy like F-14 business that made no sense. You know, at that point, I have heard some people have tried to, and I'll shout out to Laura Maxwell on this. Have said, "Oh, the whole thing's a dream hallucination," because he blew up in the stealth plane at the beginning of the movie. And you're like, I'm going to address the public. I'm not talking to Simon at this point.
No,
the public.
I deny that completely.
You guys got to get off of this death dream thing. I don't know where it came from.
What was the other one you talked? Is it the same person who said they drowned in the sea at the start? What was the other film?
Grease.
There you go.
Yeah.
Is it her again?
Well, she wasn't the one who told me about this. But
she's obsessed.
I don't know if she's seen this, but yeah, she then pulls my tail a lot by telling me every movie I watch was a death dream.
It would be kind of like interesting to see if you could fit it into every film somewhere. Because like I just started watching a film, which I'm not going to spoil, but we should podcast this as well because it's hilarious. But it starts with George Kennedy waking up in bed, and I'm like, the rest of the film could be he died in his sleep if you look at it that way.
I'm there for it. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And you get to see stuff that you'd never, for whatever reason, we don't do airplane movies anymore. And I guess on a last tack on that, there was supposed to be an X-Wing movie they were going to do for Star Wars. And I heard from multiple people saying, well, I don't know what they would do with that. And to that, I just gestured loosely at Maverick.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I wouldn't be surprised.
Star Wars.
I wouldn't be surprised if Tom Cruise didn't even hear about that and go, well, I'm going to get in there first. Because, he's a kind of clever guy and he knows what he's doing.
And maybe that's what ended up killing the X-Wing movie was this got out there and they're like, well, what else are we going to do?
Yeah, because I would think it would be something very similar, but obviously set in space,
Yeah. Well, I think that's it on Maverick. Thank you so much for getting me to watch it. And I've actually watched a bunch of Best Picture nominees for once. Like I never do that. And here I sit this year. I've seen Tar, I've seen Wakanda Forever, I've seen Everything Everywhere All at Once, and there was another one. I'm going to try and watch Elvis this weekend because I have yet to see that. But you have bought the DVDs.
I give a big thumbs up to Elvis. I was a bit scared because the first 10 minutes is Baz Luhrmann without his medication, and I went, I don't think I can do this for 2 hours. But thankfully, he slowed down a bit.
Understood. I know of which you speak. Yeah. All right. Well, any last thoughts on this film?
If you haven't seen it, if you've been living under a rock for 2 years, go and watch it. It's great fun. I think it totally recaptures the 80s feel, but gives it a nice naughty spin.
We're in the 2020s now. You've just given up 20 years of time, but
it's been in development since the noughties.
Okay. All right,
but no, it's great fun. It's great fun, and it's I think it's a big improvement on the first one, and I like the first one, but yeah, I think they did a really good job.
Absolutely, and I do like the fact they took what has become a big catchphrase of "Talk to me, Goose" and turned it into something completely different.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's kind of moving, and it's kind of nice that more than one character actually use that in different ways.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, we will be back soon. And next up, I don't know what the next podcast is after this one. I'll be totally honest, but we'll figure something out.
Well, whatever it is, I'll be your wingman.
God damn it. I'm never prepared. That was so good.
It came to me. It just came to me.
All right, everybody. Good night.
Bye.
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.